Hey guys, and welcome to our iMeet Central University Project Management 101 course today. Today we're going to be talking about project management. This is an introductory course to get us familiar with the tools and features and functionality of our project management tool. Expected outcomes. Again, we're just going to go through the basics of project management for either of you if you've been in the system and you've played around. A lot of this is going to be a refresher, but I'm hoping to introduce some new ideas to you today. We're going to talk about two types of structures, and as we get into the demonstration, I'll make sure to touch on some advanced features, including the ability to create templates out of your projects, import projects, create dependencies between tasks for shifting dates. The list goes on and on and on. So let's just start here with this one. Project management basics. So project management in iMeet Central is broken up into three things that you can use to create a project plan. Those are milestones, task lists, and tasks. And they're arranged in order here of the largest thing you can create to the smallest thing you can create. So milestones typically encompass an entire project plan. They include task lists as phases or unique components that contribute to the whole. You create a milestone, and if you want to have any tasks associated with that milestone, you have to create a task list in that milestone. Task lists are pretty self-explanatory. They just represent the big steps of a project, whether they be phases or deliverables or stages. And task lists are, quite simply, they are buckets to put tasks in. And task lists can be related to a milestone, or they can live on their own. And we'll talk about why you might create a task list that's not associated to a milestone. And then finally, the smallest component of this thing are tasks. This is what you assign your team members. They have due dates. You can give them a priority of low, medium, or high. You can give a task a description to create some detailed instructions. You can comment on tasks. You can log time against tasks. This is essentially where you track where you're doing work. Now, some advanced features that exist in the system that we'll see briefly as we move through the tool. You can template your task lists and milestones. So if you ever want to use them again, you can quickly generate project plans using templates. You can import project plans from a CSV file. So if you are a team that likes to use Excel spreadsheets, and you've got a bunch of Excel spreadsheets that keep track of tasks, and you're like, hey, let's stick this in iMeet Central. Good news, you can save it as a CSV and import it. You can also create task dependencies in the system, which would allow you to shift a task, and it will automatically impact and shift all of the tasks that are dependent on it. And that's a double-edged sword we'll talk about when I get into the demo. There are times where it's good to use dependencies. There are times where it's really bad, and I'll show you what those two examples are. And finally, you can archive project plans. So if you're in a workspace right now and you've got a bunch of task lists or a bunch of milestones and you're like, how do I clean things up without deleting stuff? You can archive your project plans, just like you can archive workspaces. Now, the typical rule of thumb that I like to follow when I build project plans in iMeet Central is I always say that a good project plan tells a story. Some people like to use project management in iMeet Central to create little bulleted punch lists, like these are the 10 things we need to do. But I find that really effective project plans actually will lead a user from start to finish and teach them how to do something. So as you're thinking about building out milestones and task lists and tasks, just keep in the back of your mind that you want your project plans to be informative. You want them to teach people how to do something. And you want to use project plans to create good internal habits. Now, I've had so many conversations about project management in iMeet Central. I've heard so much feedback, and there are so many questions that inevitably come up when an administrator is thinking about building a project plan. And I think one of the biggest things that I personally have struggled with the tool is just communicating when do you use a milestone? When do you use a task list? Because as we know, you can use iMeet Central in so many different ways. There are right ways to use it. There are wrong ways to use it. So what I want to do before we dive into the demo is present to you an analogy or a metaphor for how I tend to think of project plans. And in thinking about, well, what's an appropriate metaphor, we all have to understand the metaphor, right? We all have to relate to it. So the one that I relate to is traffic. And so before we get into actually looking at the system, I just want to quickly get us all aligned on how I typically approach building a project plan in the tool. I think of my workspaces like a highway. You have to do something, like you have to work on a project, you're working on a campaign, you have to lay out your highway, and you have to organize your projects in terms of lanes of traffic, the number of cars on your highway, and the number of occupants in every car. So the way I think about things, quite simply, is if you think about a workspace being a highway, your milestones are like the lanes of travel in your highway. You might have a project that just has 1 or 2 milestones. You might have a project that has like 10 or 15 milestones. And there's pros and cons to both. But I always think about my milestones as being like the path along which I execute a project. And so within those milestones, there are task lists. So think about task lists in milestones like cars in a lane of travel. And so when you start thinking about this metaphor, it starts to teach us a couple things about good project management. The first lesson that you can take away from this is that complex projects may feel super productive, but they can cause some serious bottlenecks. And so I've got 2 images here, 2 examples. So on the left, we have a picture of a really nice sports car cruising down a road all by its lonesome. It's wide open. We're traveling fast. I think about workspaces with 1 or 2 milestones and maybe a handful of task lists. These are projects that are very efficient. They move quickly. And I compare them to project plans like this image over on the right. This is the 405 in Los Angeles, by the way. Up on the mountain is the Getty Center. It's a big famous art museum here in LA. And this traffic, this picture that you're looking at on the right, this is like every day, all the time. We call it the 405, and the joke is that it takes you 4 or 5 hours to get anywhere on it. And if I compare this to like a project plan, this image on the right, this is a workspace with tons of milestones, a boatload of task lists. I don't even want to know how many tasks are in it. And you might think, well, this is great project planning. Like, look at all these lanes of travel, but really, you might just be overcomplicating things. And so when you're approaching a project plan, you're thinking about building one in iMeet Central, think about these 2 images and think about how efficient and simple can you make things versus how complex do you really need them to be. Now, when you think about task lists, if you remember my little image back here, think about a task list as like a car moving along a lane of travel. Within a task list, you can have tasks. So I look at these 2 images and I think, well, task lists should be effectively used, but you don't want to make them feel overcrowded. So on the left is a picture of a person in a bus. I think this is probably in an airport, and she's all by herself, and she's got this big smile on her face. She's really tiny in the picture, but if I zoomed in, she's smiling. And there's this sense of like, wow, how cool is this, right? I just have this one person on the bus. I might have a task list with 1 task in it. Isn't that cool? Like, that's so easy and efficient and fast, and a person completes the task and it's done. And then I compare it with this image on the right with the Muppets. And it's like, this is an example of potentially like a task list with a bunch of random things in it. I think we've all seen these in the system perhaps. You open up a task list and you're like, there are 50 tasks in here. Like, where do I start? It's not efficient to put 1 person in the airport bus, right? This thing on the left, 1 person in a bus, it's not the most effective use of the vehicle. Putting a single task in a task list is kind of silly. But at the same time, you don't want to make your task lists overcrowded. You need to know when to break up task lists so you have a healthy number of tasks in each one. And we'll see what this might look like as I get into the demo here in just a minute. There are two ways to build projects in iMeet Central. The first is a workspace per campaign and a milestone per project. So here's an example process, and I'm just reading this from top to bottom. You can follow along with me. An example process of this is someone says, we have an email marketing campaign that lasts all year, and every single month we send an email. We send one in September, October, November, December. It's always on the same day of every month, but I want to be able to track these things on a calendar somewhere. The solution is you just create a workspace called 2018 emails, and you create a milestone to track each email deadline. So you have this workspace, and you probably would have 12 milestones in there. Each milestone represents a different email. Therefore, you can track tasks against each one. You can see them plotted out on a calendar. The pro that comes out of this is that you create essentially a single source of truth. Anytime you're wondering how many emails we're working on, what's the status of our emails, what's the total workload, you just go into that workspace and you go to the project management tab and everything is there in front of you. And all of the content that you create related to those emails, all of the creative assets, all the copy, all the graphics, they all live in one place. The problem with this type of configuration is that if you don't maintain it, the workspace can become too big to navigate. You'll end up with hundreds of files flying all over the place, and people assigned to different tasks and different milestones, and it can become a little bit noisy. So to run a configuration like this, you have to make sure that you're pruning it and maintaining it. That means, once a month you go in there, archive some things you don't need, delete some files that were redundant, and so on. The other way that you can build a project in iMeet Central is you create a workspace per project and a milestone per deliverable. This is, in my opinion, the best configuration in the system. So here's an example, process. We put on 4 events every year, and each event requires some brochures and a video that we're going to work on. The best solution is to create a workspace for each event. And within that workspace, you create a milestone for a brochure, and you create a milestone for a video. And the benefits there is that it creates compartmentalization of files and role assignments. You can use role assignments in this model because if you have like an editor, for example, and you create that editor role, and you assign a person to be the editor, they're the editor on all the stuff for this project. Whether it's a brochure, a video, a social media post, it's always the same editor. The other really cool thing it does is it allows for workspace level reporting options using custom workspace property fields. So if you're ever trying to create a report and you get to a point where you're like, I just don't feel like I have enough data to really get the reporting I need, sometimes going with a workspace per project model can save you. This means that you're going to end up creating more workspaces in the system, but you can always archive them when they're done. So the con here is that if you don't properly scope and test your configuration, you can sometimes feel like you're going into multiple workspaces to get work done. If you ever feel like I got to go into this workspace to do one thing and another workspace to do another thing, and it's all for the same project, then it wasn't properly configured. You want to make sure that you're still going into one workspace to do your job, but they're separated by project. So now that we've talked about all this like theory stuff, let's actually go into the tool and let's do a quick demonstration. In the meantime, I am looking at the global chat in the Ready Talk room. I'm not seeing any questions so far, so you're either all tuned out already or I'm doing pretty good. So I'm going to hope I'm doing well. I'm going to log into iMeet Central here. And thank you, Jennifer. And let's dive in. So I'm logged in as a fictitious user named Andrea Caravis. Thank you, Jason. And I'm in a company called Vacao. This is a fictitious company that we go and we play around in all the time. And it's what I use here to do my demos. So I'm going to create, I'm going to start from scratch. And I'm going to create this model, a workspace per project. My second option is what I'm going to build, and a milestone per deliverable is my use case example here. So here we go. The idea here is that we are doing an event for Macy's. Macy's is a customer of ours, and we're going to be doing their summertime gala. So I'm going to create a workspace that's going to host all of my event documents, files, deliverables, insurance certificates, creative briefs, everything in one workspace. So I'm going to go to Create Workspace up here on the top right corner, and I'm going to title the workspace. I got to pick a template. I'll pick this one, the Project Workspace. That's the most basic. And it'll do. I'm going to go ahead and name this workspace Macy's 2018 Summertime Gala. And one of the nice things about giving this workspace a contextual title is that if I log in later and I'm like, oh shoot, where did I put that workspace? I can just search up here, and I can pull up workspace titles in my search bar up at the top, which is kind of cool. I'm not going to group it. I'm going to add some people here. Add Nat and Timothy and William. Sure, let's get a lot of people in here. Awesome. And I'll click on Create Workspace in the bottom right-hand corner. So after my workspace generates, I'm not going to make any changes to files and discussions and the tabs and so on. I talk about those things in other university courses, but for right now, we're just going to focus entirely on the tasks and milestones page. So as soon as I get this loaded, check something here on my back end. The workspaces list. Ooh, there it is. There we go. I'm going to go into the Project Management tab. I'm going to go into Tasks and Milestones. Now, this is where we want to kind of think about that analogy that I posed, right? So my workspace is a highway. My lanes are milestones. If you want to get work done, this is my recommendation. Always start with a milestone. Always start with a milestone. And I tell that to people sometimes, and they're like, that's insane. I don't need one. Start practicing it, and you are going to find that it will help to better organize your work. So I'm going to start with a milestone. And in this case, I'm using a milestone per deliverable. I'm working on the Macy's 2018 Summertime Gala project. And for this project, I need a flyer and I need an email blast. So that's going to be 2 milestones. The first one is a flyer and the other one's an email blast. So I'm going to go over here to where it says Create Milestone, and I'm going to click on that. And if I have any saved templates, which I'll show you in a minute, I can select from an existing template, or I can start from scratch. And I'm going to go ahead and title this Event Flyer. I can assign someone to this milestone. Assigning a person to a milestone will plot that milestone on their personal calendar. So they're able to go to their calendar and they can see what projects they're currently working on or what deliverables they're responsible for. You typically assign a project manager to a milestone, someone who's going to be on top of the execution of this particular thing. In this case, Helen is responsible for the flyer. She may have people who work under her who will be assigned to included tasks. I can notify Helen via email at the time of milestone creation by checking this box here. And I can also copy users on this milestone. So I can copy Timothy, for example. When you copy a person on a milestone or a task, they're sent an email notification anytime the status is changed, so if the milestone's marked as complete, or anytime a comment is made. I'm going to give my milestone a due date. The due date for the milestone is when I want my flyer to be finished. So I need the flyer. This is for the summer. So let's go ahead and I need this by June 1st. We'll say May 31st because we're going to start distributing it in June. I can give my milestone a description. This is where you want to create some context. So Helen's going to be assigned. She's going to have no idea what this is. So I'll use a description to tell a little story. The event flyer should be printed on high gloss paper and be full color. It should include images of people, drinking lemonade in really nice clothes because it's for Macy's. I can attach and relate files to this milestone. Now, the best example is if you have a creative brief and it's a document, I would attach that creative brief to my milestone. So let's see here. Let me kind of move some things around. Get rid of that. So if I have a document, like here's a PDF, what if I call this creative brief? I can attach this file from my computer directly to the milestone. And I can attach as many as I want. I'm just going to attach one. And the last couple things that I can do here are if I have custom milestone property fields programmed in company settings, I can use custom milestone property fields to track things like department or overall project status or budget, for example. Maybe I've got $500 for the flyer. I'm going to click on Create in the bottom right-hand corner, and after this milestone is created, my Tasks and Milestone page, it updates. So again, if I go back to the Project Management tab and I come down to Tasks and Milestones, you'll see now on the left-hand side I have my Event Flyer milestone. The Milestone Details page, which you see here, shows the description. It shows when it's due, who it's assigned to, and who's copied. It records who created and last modified the milestone. Here I find my file attachments. And down below, I've got my Comments tab and my Properties tab. The Comments tab on a milestone is the best place to centralize conversations around, in this case, the deliverable. I can mention other users in the comment. Let's see, who else did I pull in here? Lily. I can say, Lily, I'm going to need your help on this flyer project. I'll just say on this flyer. Can you schedule some models to take photos of them drinking lemonade? When I make a comment and I mention another Workspace member in that comment, it sends them an email notification. That email notification includes a link back to this milestone. So essentially, any conversations you guys have around this flyer, you should have as a comment on the milestone. Now, within every milestone, we can create task lists. So if you remember our silly analogy, you have a lane of traffic, and it can be empty. You don't have to have task lists in your milestones if you don't want. But if you needed to, you can click on Create Task List right here. This is actually in the milestone details area, and I'll click on Create Task List. And the task list that I'm going to create, I'm going to create 3, because I'm going to use task lists to represent phases of this particular project. And the first phase of creating a flyer is Create Copy. I'll click on Create. When I create a task list underneath a milestone, you'll see on the left-hand side it looks like a nested folder. It's over here. So underneath Event Flyer, I have a Copy Task List, and I'm going to create a couple tasks. So the quickest way to create tasks is you just type into this box right here, and then I press the Enter key on my keyboard. So for my Copy Task List, I'm going to go ahead and say Draft Copy, Get Copy Approval, and then the third one is going to be Send Copy to Graphic Design. Sure. After tasks are created, I can click to edit any of these property values here in the actual task list. So some of the things that I can change are the title. If I hover over a title and I click this pencil. So for example, rather than Send Copy to Graphic Design, I should do this. I should change this to say Upload Copy for Graphic Design, right? Because I don't want them to email it. I just want them to upload that file into iMeet Central for my graphic designer to find. I can change priorities. Now, what are priorities used for? That's a common question I get a lot. really, the best use of priority is a way of sorting things. So let me show you. I'm going to say priority low, and priority high. And I'm going to assign myself to these 3 tasks. And I can assign people to tasks in a couple of ways. One way is I can just hover over this assigned to column, click the pencil, type in the name of a person, and then click on Save. The other way that you can assign people to tasks is use the little checkboxes here along the left-hand side and click the Assign drop-down menu that appears at the top, where you can bulk action assignments across multiple tasks within this list. So I'm going to go ahead and say Assign to me. All right. When I'm assigned multiple tasks in the system, and I'm assigned to tasks across multiple workspaces even, I can find a list of all of my task assignments by going to my name in the top right corner and coming down to where it says Tasks. The My Tasks page shows you a list of all tasks that you're assigned, tasks that you've completed, tasks you've assigned to other people, or tasks that you're currently copied on. So why is priority so useful? Well, if I go to tasks assigned to me, I'm assigned 21 tasks. I can approach this task list either by looking through the titles, like maybe I want to work on final layout today, or by milestone. Realistically, most people tackle their task list by the due date column, right? They're like, show me the thing that I need to do now. And so they'll come in here and they'll sort by due date, and they'll say, all right, I need to start doing layout and copy development. If you use task priorities, it adds another layer by which people can sort things. And so if I sort by priority, I can pull things up and say, oop, I've got a high priority thing on my plate right now. This allows you as a project manager to empower your team members with multiple ways to prioritize work. That's all it's for. So there's no workflow that drives off priority. It's really just a way to give things a little flag. Now, my recommendation is give everything a low priority. Make low your standard. So standard priority is low because you're never going to go below a standard priority. Make things high priority if you need people to be aware of something on the roadmap. Hey, this particular project, it's really important. I really need to make sure that you hit this deadline, upload copy for graphic design. Regardless of when you get these other 2 things done, you got to get this has to be on schedule. So I make this a high priority so I can sort by that in my tasks view. The last thing you're going to want to do for your tasks is give them start and due dates. And again, I can just click to edit these things. So I can say, let's see, if the flyer is going to be due on May 31st, right, that's when my flyer's due, then I need to make sure that graphic gets the files for copy 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And in order to get them to graphic design by May 17th, then I need copy approval by the day before, May 16th. And so I need to be finished drafting the copy by May 15th. You see how I worked backward? I start at the bottom of my task list and I work back because I know my deadline. I know when I need to have this thing finished by. So then I just realistically ask myself, all right, well, if I need to have upload copy done by this day, when do I need the prior thing finished by? And that's typically how I build out timelines. You can also give your tasks a start date. Giving a task a start date is especially useful for helping your team members project by what day they need to begin work to realistically meet their deadline. So let me give you an example of this. Let's pause here for a moment and flip over to the calendar. Your users are going to log into iMeet Central and they're going to start looking around and they're going to say, what am I supposed to be working on? And most users go to calendars, or they might go to their My Tasks list, but where a lot of people end up is they end up on a calendar. because they're like, what am I doing this week? What am I doing next week? According to this workspace, I don't have to be doing anything. In fact, I can switch it to week view, and things get even more dangerous because now my visibility is limited to 7 days. So I don't have anything to do this week. I got nothing to do next week. I got nothing to do the week after that. Whoop, uh-oh. I was supposed to have copy drafted by Tuesday. Imagine if you're an end user and you're just living week to week, or even maybe month to month. You may get caught off guard by some of your deadlines, and next thing you know, you're backed up on things. So this is where task start dates come in really handy. If I go back to my task list, so I'm going to go to Tasks, Event Flyer, go to my Copy Task List, so right over here. Let's say it's going to take 2 weeks for copy to be drafted. That's kind of a long time, but hey, we'll give them that lead. So that means that in order for this to be due by May 15th, I need them to start by May 1st. When you give a task a start and a due date, it changes the way they are displayed on your calendars. They no longer appear as those little single items. They now appear as a horizontal bar. This means that your users can better forecast when they're supposed to start work. If I were the copywriter, I would say I need to start drafting copy for this flyer by next Tuesday if I'm going to realistically hit my deadline of Tuesday the 15th. So some tasks, logically, they might benefit from a start date. Some tasks, they don't really need a start date, like this one, upload copy for graphic design. That should really only take you a day. If you don't get to it until Thursday morning, you're okay. You're uploading a file, no problem. It is very high priority, though. So that's a task start and due date. And again, all of these changes can be made. If I go back into my milestone and I go to my task list, I can just click to edit all of these things. Now, the last thing that I can do here from this list is, of course, I can mark these tasks as complete. If I check the little checkbox beside a task, I can click my complete button, and I can mark it as complete. You'll see over here on the left-hand side, the little quantity number in the task list indicates the number of incomplete tasks in that list. And I can also see by the progress completion bar underneath the milestone, how far along am I in completing this flyer. In this case, I'm 33% of the way done. One of my 3 tasks has been marked as complete. Some other cool things that you can do from this list is, if I check a couple of these boxes here, I can bulk update statuses. I can mark them as in progress, for example. This lets a project manager know, like, hey, I'm working on something. I can select these checkboxes, and from the More drop-down menu, I can shift dates. I can also move them to other task lists. So shift dates, if I grabbed all 3 of these and I click on More, shift dates, I can shift them forward or backward by a certain number of business days or calendar days. I can also delete my tasks, and I can also create additional tasks. Now this is all just from the Click to Edit Task List view. If you select one of these tasks, you land on the Task Detail page. The Task Detail page looks a lot like the Milestone Detail page. This is where you can find a task description, attach or relate files to a particular task, or make comments. So a good use case here is I have a task called Draft Copy. Well, if I have a file on my computer called Flyer Copy, guess what? I can just attach that file to my task, mark the task as complete, maybe make a quick comment, @mention another user, for example, say @Nate, hey, copy draft is finished, attaching it to my task. And so now everything kind of becomes contextual, right? If you're looking through a project plan and you're like, how far along are we? Well, I can go to my Event Flyer milestone. I see that copy is 33% of the way done. I can look at my copy task list. I can say, oh, look, there's an attachment on that task, and there's a comment, so I got my little icons here. I can go into that task and I can find my copy document. And I can open it from right here if I need to. Let's take a look now at the actual edit task screen, because there's some additional things that we can do with tasks that are oftentimes overlooked. If I click on the Edit button in the Task Details page, you'll find that I can make all of those same changes using the Click to Edit here in the Task Editor screen. This is where I can give a task a description. Now, task descriptions are especially useful for standardizing processes, making sure that people are following specific company guidelines. So in this task, draft copy, I would use the description to say, make sure to limit copy to 100 words or less, Times New Roman font, and then I'll also do something like, please save all copy files as follows, and I'll use my fun little bullet point tool right here. Save as a Word doc, 1-inch margins, and I'll click on Update. So now I've got some additional instructions there for my task assignee. Now, some teams who don't use task descriptions will go down this path. So this is a poor configuration decision. Some teams will put all of that gobbledygook in the task title. Draft copy of 100 words in Microsoft Word with Times New Roman and 1-inch margins. Holy smokes. People will do it. Why is this not recommended? Well, it gets kind of funky when people start looking at their My Tasks page because the task title disappears. So if I find that task here, oh wow, I don't even see it on here. Hold on a minute. Oh, because it was completed. One moment. Let me go back into my task list and reopen that. Reopen. All right, now if I go back to, oh, there you can see it right there. That's what I mean. Task titles will be truncated in the system if they are too long. And then people have to like hover over things. So my recommendation is keep your task titles short and actionable and use your task descriptions wherever possible. So this task title is way too long. Just say draft copy, that's it. And put all your other fun messaging in the description. Some other cool things that you can do in the task editor screen is, if you scroll down, you can list budgeted time. So I can say, hey, this should take you 2 hours. Now, some people get confused by this. Budgeted time versus task duration. The task duration is the difference between the task start and due date, 2 weeks. It's going to take you 2 weeks to do this. Budgeted time, I don't know what 14 times 24 is, but it's a lot. It's over 200, so I'll say like, this is wrong, but I'm going to say 250 hours because it's 2 weeks. This is wrong. Your budgeted time should be the total amount of time working required to accomplish this. It's going to take this person 2 hours to draft copy, but I'm giving them 2 weeks to get it done. When I update these changes, you'll now see on the right-hand side it says budgeted 2 hours. And I'll show you how to log time here in a second. Go back into the task editor. Here's where you can tag your tasks. So you can say this is a creative task. Task tags are used for reporting purposes only. That's it. That's all they're used for. So if you ever said, hey, I need to see a list of all creative tasks in the system, you can use a tag for that, or you can use a custom task property field. But tags typically are not used for searching. They're typically used for reporting. You can also use task tags within a workspace. If you're tagging your tasks with things, over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a tasks by tag dropdown. So if I give this a refresh, and I click that, I can say, show me all my creative tasks within this workspace. So it's up to you how you want to use that, but that's what you're using task tags for. If I edit this task one more time, you'll see I can also create reminders. A lot of people don't know about this, but you can create a reminder on a task to say, hey, 1 day prior, I want an email notification to go out to the assignee. It will not send a reminder if the task is marked as completed. But if it's incomplete, if it's open, there we go. I have a nice little reminder that goes out. I can see over here, reminder 1 day prior. And that way, this person is notified, like, hey, don't forget, your copy draft is due tomorrow. At the top of the task details page, you'll find that you can log time against the task. When you log time against a task, you're doing it anytime you are accounting for hours worked. It's always a unit of hour. So if I work on this for 1 hour, I just type in 1 and I click on create. And you'll see over here, it updates the time tracking details to say time spent is 1 hour. If I come back and I work another hour and a half, I log time, I type in 1.5 hours, and I click on create, and it totals those two values together over here on the right. I talk a little bit about time tracking in our reporting course. I'm not going to dive into it in too much detail right now, but if you're looking for a way to track how much time people are spending on projects, this is the way to do it. Have them log time against the task, and you can run reports. I'll give you a quick sneak peek. If you go up to report, create report up here in the top right corner, and I go create a custom task report. So if I create a custom task report in the system, there's a cumulative time column here that I can use to create some fun reports. So if I remove a filter and I go cumulative time, I can sum by total time worked, for example. And when I do, it will start to show me some pretty handy reports. So you can see down here at the very bottom of the report, it says total time worked 20.5 hours. So I'm not going to get into detail on this, but I just want you to understand that people, when they log time against a task here, it rolls into reporting at a global level. So you can filter it by assignee. You can say, like, how many hours did Andrea work last week? You can do that. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm just glancing at the global chat, not seeing any questions. But at this point, we've kind of summed up basic structure, right? I have a milestone. In that milestone, I have task lists, and in those task lists, I have tasks. So I'm going to flesh this out just a little bit more. In this milestone, I have a copy task list. I might also have a design task list. And I might also have a final approval task list. In my design task list, I might have tasks for my designer. So create design, get design approval. Maybe that's all I need. And for final approval, I might say something like all copy and graphics due. And I might have another task that says final production layout approved. And then I'll also create one more. I'll say this one, flyer completed, out for printer. Do you have to number the individual task list, or is that just personal preference? That's a great question. So the order in which task lists are arranged over here is alphanumeric. So if you do not put a number at the front, it's going to order it in whatever alphabetical arrangement there is. This is a bad example because C comes before D and D comes before F. But if you had task lists and you needed them to appear in a specific order, you would need to put either a number or a letter at the beginning. I always use a 2-digit number and a period. That's just my personal preference. I think it looks clean. All right, so let's talk about some advanced features here, and then we'll kind of round things out. So in this milestone event flyer, it's due May 31st. That due date, May 31st, that's going to align with a task due date. And that task due date is my flyer completed out for printer date. So this is the last thing. Hey, when it goes out to printer, we're done. So I match this date to my milestone due date. There's a relation there. The milestone due date isn't just something floating out in outer space. It's actually tied to something that happens. And that thing that happens in this case is that the flyer is completed. I'm going to go ahead and build out a couple additional dates here. So final production layout approved. I'm going to go ahead and give us 3 business days to get that done. And then I'm going to jump to another task list, design. Get design approval. We'll say that this happens sometime in the middle of May. So I've got some dates floating around in here. In fact, I need to give dates to everything. Hold on. 15th. And then final approval. All copy and graphics due. This needs to be by May, we'll say 25th. Okay, so I have a milestone with 3 task lists. Each task list is representative of a different phase. This allows me as a project manager, if people are completing tasks, to see things from a global level, right? I'm a third of the way done with copy. Next is design, and then we go into final approval. Again, our project plan tells a story. Here are some advanced features for you all to be aware of. The first is, by using a milestone to encapsulate all of this stuff, you get to use a very, very powerful tool in iMeet Central, and that is, when you change the milestone due date, it automatically changes all of your task due dates. How cool is that? So this event flyer is due on May 31st, right? Which means that I need to get the flyer completed and out for printer on May 31st. But what if that changes? Someone says, we need it a week sooner. Uh-oh. Well, I don't want to have to go through these task lists and manually update these dates. That would stink. All I need to do is go to the milestone and edit the milestone due date. To edit the milestone due date, I click the Edit button. I change the due date. I move it up from the 31st to the 24th. And iMeet Central will automatically shift your tasks backward by a corresponding number of days. I click on Update. I give my screen a quick refresh. The milestone due date is now May 24th, which means if I go into this task list, oh, look. My flyer completed out for printer date is now May 24th. And all of the task lists have all been shifted. So if you're using iMeet Central to better manage shifting timelines, this is how you do it. Use a milestone per deliverable, build out your task lists, and change your milestone due date as needed. Let's say you're a project manager who likes to go in and make changes to your timeline and you want to see tasks in relation to one another. Admittedly, this is kind of difficult because your tasks are broken up into different lists. But if I go to the Milestone Details page and I click the More dropdown, you'll find that there's an option here for the Milestone Gantt. The Milestone Gantt view is a visualization of your project plan using a Gantt chart. And when it first loads, it's kind of boring. But if you go up here to the top, there's a button that says Expand All. And if you then go over a couple steps to the right, there's a button here that says Zoom to Fit. This shows you your entire project plan in a visual layout. And it allows you as a project manager to literally click and drag your due dates around on this chart. So I can see right here that I have a problem. My Get Copy Approved, here, let me move this. Get Copy Approval and Upload Copy for graphic design tasks, they happen after my design task list. Whoops, that was a mistake. So I can grab these tasks and I can actually slide them around. And I can say, that looks better. You can move multiple tasks at once by moving their task list bar. So you'll see this little blue bar right here. If I just move this, it will shift all of my design tasks with it. If you need to create dependencies between tasks, meaning if I move this one, then I need this one down here to move along with it, you can do that here on the Gantt chart by, if you hover over one of these little boxes, you'll see there's a little white button on the right. And if you click and hold and you drag that around, you can connect one task to another. if I just let go of my mouse, it creates a dependency between two tasks. And now if I slide one, it brings the other one with it. You can even create cross-task list dependencies. So if I move this one, it shifts those. This is, as I was saying near the beginning of the call, this is a feature, it's an advanced feature called task dependencies. It is a double-edged sword. And the reason why is this. I'm going to go ahead and create dependencies across my entire project timeline. I see people do this all the time, and to be completely honest, sometimes I hiss, because I'm going to show you a real-life example of task dependencies completely derailing your project. I have created dependencies across my entire project timeline, meaning if I move this one, it moves everything. And some people go, that's perfect, that's exactly what I want. Well, bear with me. I'm going to save my changes. And now that I've saved my changes, I'm going to go back into the tasks and milestones area, and I'm going to go into my task list. I'll go here. Your team likely will not visit the Gantt chart very often. Where your team is going to spend their time is in these task lists. And if your team has the edit permission, which they most likely do, they have the ability to make changes to these dates. Now, if I have a task dependency between this task, and I change this date here, so I change it from May 7th to May 9th, it automatically updates my dependent task. Remember, I created that dependency in the Gantt chart. That's pretty cool. And your team is going to love you for configuring it, because they go, oh, cool, I don't need to update all of my tasks. I just change one, and it changes the other one. Hooray! Well, here's the problem. In this case, I'm changing my dates in my copy task list. My copywriter is in here saying, oh man, I need to move this because I'm super busy, but you know, I can move this. I gotta move that to next Tuesday. And then they leave. They're like, goodbye. They click on the home tab. They close. They go do something else. They walk away from it. Unbeknownst to your copywriter, they just changed all the dates in your design task list. They just changed all the dates in your final approval task list. They just updated your entire project plan. And the worst news is there's no undo. There's no undo button. So if I'm in here and I just, for example, if I change it here, if I go, boop, change this to the 9th, if I go, whoops, I made a mistake, I can click on undo right now. But if I navigate away from this page, I'm up a creek. So my warning to you all is, if I go back into the Gantt chart, yes, you can create task dependencies across your entire project plan, and people, they freak out, and it's, you know, it's amazing, and they're like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. But then they're, you know, halfway through a really long, important and exhaustive project plan, and somebody goes in and futzes with the dates, and it completely derails your timeline and your deadlines. And there's no way to get it back. You would have to manually go in here and recalculate and figure out, okay, where were we? I think that was here. I think that was here. I think that was here. And that's all fine gravy if it's the nice little tight project plan like this one. But imagine this thing has 30 or 40 tasks in it. It can get pretty ugly. So just a heads up on that. But that's how you can create task dependencies. You can do it here in the Gantt chart. You can also create task dependencies in the task editor. Let's see here. If I go, and I see your question, David, I'll answer it in just a moment. If I go into a task, it says this task depends on upload copy for graphic design. That doesn't mean that you can't complete this thing. I can complete it out of order. All this says is it communicates to me, hey, you need to be aware of what's going on here. And so I can click this link and go into the next one and say, okay, what's going on here? Oh, this is incomplete. Wait, it's depending on this. I can click this link. It'll take me one step back. So you can use these little breadcrumb links to keep going back. If you wanted to change these task dependencies in here, it's not as easy as on the Gantt, but you can do it. You click the edit button, and it's going to be down here where it says depends on. And you can click this drop down and it will show you a list of tasks that come before it. So if I go to the very, very end, if I go to my final task and I click on edit, and I come down to where it says depends on, I can see every task that it could be potentially dependent on. So I can say this is dependent on get copy approval, and it shows you down here, it shows you what task list that's from. What's the best practice? Do you disallow editing from most people and leave it in the hands of a project manager? That's a great question, David. So I typically don't recommend stripping a person's edit permissions until they mess something up. I mean, just to be completely fair, you don't hear it a lot, people saying, oh, I completely hosed my project plan. And typically, you know, it has to deal with a training conversation. You need to educate your team to say, please do not change these dates. Remember that if the audit log is turned on, if I go into this workspace and I turn on the audit log and I look at my task, there's an audit log history on this whole thing. So I can come in here and I can be like, who changed this? And if I go to the task, I click on audit log, I can see like who messed with it. But if you're really having a hard time instituting this, you really want to use task dependencies, my best advice to you is, thank you, Jennifer, don't create cross-task list dependencies. That's my advice. Don't do this. See how you've got two task lists, and the first task in this list is dependent on this task in this list? That to me is a big no-no, because as you saw, if you change a task and you navigate away, even if you like navigate to another task list to be like, whoops, did I mess something up? You've lost the chance to click that undo button and you're in trouble. So I limit my dependencies to be within the same task list. Okay, last thing here, it was mentioned in the agenda, so I will cover it. Templating. If you do a project and you create your milestone, your task list, your tasks, and you're like, this is the bomb. I want to use this every time I have an event flyer, you can convert milestones into templates by clicking the More drop-down and click on Convert to Milestone Template. Select whether or not you want it to work forward from a due date or backward, or work forward from a start date or backward from a due date. 99% of the time you're going to be using the work backward. The title is essentially what the title of your template is going to be. So if this was called something funky like Springtime Gala Flyer, maybe you just want to change it and make it more generic to just say Event Flyer. You can eliminate what the default description is going to be. Click on Convert. And after it's been converted into a template, if you refresh your screen here, you'll find it in your new milestone drop-down picker. I think it was this one, Event Flyer. So I can say I'm doing another event flyer. It's going to be out in September, and it's going to be the Halloween Spooky Flyer. I'll assign this to Nat and click on Create, and it automatically drops in all of your task lists. And if I look at the date here, September 28th, it influences all of the dates for those tasks. If you create project plans using an Excel spreadsheet, you can import it from under the Options menu. You click on Options, and you go up here to where it says Import from CSV. And you can import a project plan from a CSV file. It's sort of like a self-guided wizard. You choose your file from your computer, and there are 4 steps. I'm not going to go into detail on that right now, but if you had questions about specifically how to import a project, we have a Help Center article on that topic, and it's actually really great. All right, so that is essentially Project Management 101. We did talk about a lot, but hopefully from this call you have a better sense or a handle on how you can create project plans using milestones and task lists and tasks. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining. I'll go ahead and I'll wrap it up there. Again, additional questions, you can also contact our support team if you ever notice any issues, support@imeetcentral.com. our help center or your account engagement manager or customer success manager. We're always happy to help answer questions for you and point you in the right direction. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time today, and hopefully I will see you on the next one.